Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Muslim CEO show. This is the place for you if you want to become an amazing leader and grow yourself and your business or organization to the next level. Today I am honored to have with me brother Zaheer Khatri. Assalamu alaikum, bro.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, Mohammad? You okay?
Alhamdulillah. So I just want to start by saying I'm really honored to have you here. I think I'm very lucky, alhamdulillah, because I know you don't do that many interviews. You're like an exclusive VIP. You don't do many. So I'm really honored to have you here. And I'm really excited about learning from you. Learning. You see what I did there, right? So for those of you that don't know, Brother Zaheer is the founder of one of my favorite brands, my favorite Muslim brands, called Learning Roots. So this week, my son, and last week, he has been bugging me, bro. And I feel like beating you up for it. Because he keeps saying to me, Abu, can we go to the shop to buy the Sahaba cards? Abu, can we go to the shop to buy the Sahaba cards? And he does it over and over again. Right? So it's, Learning Roots is something that has helped, hundreds of thousands of parents across the world in many countries, to really bring up their child with Islam at its heart. And I'm telling you that you will know Learning Roots, but maybe you don't know the name, but you've probably, used their products. Maybe, you've definitely seen their products. I remember going to this random masjid and seeing in the middle of the room, maybe even at Heathrow Airport as well, I think, this Qibla pointer, which was made by Learning Roots. So just like really amazing kind of products that you do. And we're going to delve into all of it. And I'm really, like I said, I'm really looking forward to going through it. One of the reasons I'm looking to go through it, because what I found by doing these interviews is I get to know more about the person, even though we've known each other for years. So I'm looking forward to this, from learning from you and inshallah learning more about you, okay? So the first thing I've got for you is a question, which I didn't tell you about. So it's like a surprising question, right?
Okay.
What was 10-year-old Zaheer like?
Okay. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you so much for having me on. Alhamdulillah, it's an honor to be here with you. So the 10-year-old Zaheer, I was studious, curious, and very experimental as an extension of being curious. So I'd always like to try stuff, whatever it would be. So I remember any kind of class, any kind of extracurricular activity, I'd always take part in that kind of thing. And just a normal, what is now a normal like kid, just exploring life and looking at seeing where interests are, but quite serious when I was into something. So I'd really get into the zone, as it were. I wasn't like sort of try it and leave it, move on. I really wanted to sort of master it and then move on. That was the kind of kid I was.
And what kind of things were you into? Like you said, studious. Were you like a geek and a nerd type thing?
Yeah, so often, I was known as that. But a variety of different things. So I remember like drawing classes. I'd be really into that. I'd get books on it. And I was really into planes as well. So I'd take it to the extent where I'd write off to all these different airlines and ask them to send in their brochures, and I'd have a whole collection of stuff. And when I was into something, I was really into it, and I'd sort of complete it until I got absolutely I felt like I've done it and I've mastered it, and I'd move on. So that's the kind of kid I was.
Amazing. And what did you want to be at that age? Do you remember?
A pilot.
A pilot.
I always wanted to be a pilot, but my dreams were dashed because I later discovered that I was colorblind.
Really?
And when I went to the eye hospital and they concluded that through their test, they told my parents that one thing your son can't be is a pilot.
SubhanAllah.
So that was out the window because I was
I'm so glad. Otherwise, right now you'd probably be at 35,000 feet, flying a plane, and all of our children would be suffering because of it.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah.
So just to clarify, color blindness, does that mean that you cannot see colors, or what does it mean exactly?
So there's different degrees of color blindness. My one means that I can't see different shades of green and red. So sometimes if something, for example, is pink, I might see it as white, or is something. They noticed that because when I was a child and I was into drawing, I'd color the grass brown, for example, or I'd color the trunk of a tree green, that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So I'd got these things mixed up. And that's what prompted my parents to sort of investigate further.
Okay, amazing. So that's really, again, like I said, I've learned something new, alhamdulillah, which is great. So tell me a little bit about Learning Roots and what it is and how did it kind of come about?
So Learning Roots started when I was a teacher actually. I was trained to become a teacher, and I was always looking for something that I could sort of contribute to beyond teaching. I didn't really go into teaching to become a teacher. And when I did that, I realized one thing when I was in schools, and that was that the quality of resources out there for teaching things like maths and English were on a completely different level to what was available for teaching Islam. And at the same time, as my first year of teaching, my first daughter was born. And that really prompted me to think about what kind of world she would grow into and what kind of stuff there was out there for me to try and help raise her as a great Muslim child. And there really wasn't anything that I really sort of liked. And I thought, well, let's do something about it. So I decided to leave my teaching post, and I started Learning Roots at that point.
How long were you a teacher for?
Technically, a term. Technically, a term. Okay. So I did my year of training. So after that, I got a post as a maths teacher in secondary school in London. And then I decided after a term, probably after 2 weeks of starting actually, that I wanted to do something different. As I said, I didn't go into teaching to become a teacher. I went into it to sort of see what's available within education. And I found that area as something that was calling me.
Okay, amazing. It kind of reminds me of those people that drop out of high school and then become billionaires type of thing or something. So, mashallah. Okay, great. So, what is it all about? Like Learning Roots, like how would you describe it? What's the benefit of it? What is it? Why have it?
So at the core, it's all about helping parents raise great Muslim children. That's the kind of thing that I wanted it to do for me when I first started. And we do that through a very innovative approach. Like I like to call it creative excellence. We give a lot of thought about what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and what kind of effect it has, what kind of experience it has on children when they're going through that whole learning phase of Islam. Because we wanted that first touch point, or any touch point when they learn about Islam, to be something that genuinely touches their heart, that enlightens them, and that endears them to Allah's Deen. And that's really what it's all about. It's about creating these experiences. At the moment, it's through products. Through physical products or books or stories or flashcards or games that we produce. But the aim is always the same, and that's to create that endearing experience that has a lasting effect on the child in a way that really brings them close to Allah Azza wa Jalla and His Deen.
Okay, great. So I get that, you had this desire. How did you take it from being a desire of a teacher who's just kind of like, only been training for a little while to actually making it a real product that helps parents?
So in terms of like starting that journey, it was just about diving in. I remember like the hardest step was to actually sort of go against the norm of continuing with teaching and actually sort of handing in that resignation and starting the whole journey. And that's what I did. So I just sort of mustered up the courage, and I gave my letter of resignation to the head teacher. And when she found out that my wife was about to have a baby, she said, if I was your mother, I'd say you're making a very silly decision. Wow. And I thought to myself, well, alhamdulillah, you're not my mum. So I just, that's the first thing. And it does often take a lot of courage to, as you say, to sort of make that jump.
So what was it that gave you the courage, like at that point? Because, like I said, most people in their first term of teaching would have thought, listen, let me give this a year or two, and then after that I'll check. Like, how did you find that courage to do that?
I think I had a lot of clarity. It was very clear to me that I didn't want to become a teacher in the normal sense. I was, especially in London, I saw teaching as more behaviour management than teaching. So I had that push factor, and I had also the calling factor as well, because, after spending a short time in school, I realised that it wasn't the kind of environment that I wanted, for my life, generally speaking. I wanted to sort of create a life around something that I'm very passionate about. And so that was a pull factor as well for me. So the two together, alhamdulillah, really helped to make that happen.
Amazing. And so then you had the courage, you took the step, mashallah. And what was the first kind of things that you did?
So the first thing I did was actually took about 7 months or so, 8 months before the first products came out. So initially I sort of yes, you are. You don't know what you're doing. You start off sort of trying to put things together, figuring out what you're meant to be doing, that sort of thing. I didn't have a clear idea at that time in terms of products or what I'd make. But then, as time was going by and push came to shove, and I thought, whatever I've got, let me just put it out there right now, and let's just see how it goes. So we produced the first 3 products. of which none of which survive today in their original form. So that's always a good sign.
What was like some of the first products you did?
So we made a HIF logbook, which was designed to help children memorize. We've now we've actually just discontinued that, and we're going to revise that put that into a new edition of Juz Amma. And we had a Sira timeline, which again we kind of dropped and then moved into a different product. They sort of moved into different products. They didn't sort of completely die out. And we had something called Pyramid Pillars, which was, well, the less said about that, the better. So, alhamdulillah. So that was one of my ideas that kind of failed. But there you go. And that's what it's all about. It's a learning journey. You're going to make mistakes. You embrace the mistakes and you move on. And that's what we did. So the main thing was getting out there as quickly as possible to market. And I remember our first road trip, we went to different stores and showed them our products, and had a good response. We either got a yes, or we got a maybe, or we got a no. But either way, we learned something, and that was really important. So any kind of aspiring leaders out there, it's just really about getting your ideas out, getting your products out, and letting the market decide whether they like it or not, and that gives you a lot of feedback on how to move forward.
So, had you done any business before then?
No, not really. No.
So, I mean, because now, Learning Route's amazing, mashallah, tabarakallah, not only in its brand, in its design, in its products, but also in terms of its distribution. I've seen it in different countries all over the place. I mean, you guys are in over 30 countries, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, all over the place. So, this is not like a small kind of thing where, I've done in the past, where you go to China, you get some product. This is like you going full force, design, everything. And so there's so many different elements to the business, including distribution, pricing, retailing, all this stuff. How did you get to grips with all this stuff without any background experience in it?
Through first-hand experience, to be honest. I did have some advisors. I had some early mentors that were really helpful. Not specifically in my field, but they were very helpful. They were successful business people, and they did help me out with some good advice in the beginning. But the majority of it, to be honest with you, was trial and error. It's trying things, realizing you get burnt, and you've got to realize you've got to take a different course, and just capitalizing on the things that work pretty well. So it's that. But the more that you're going out there and doing it, and the faster you're failing, the quicker you'll succeed.
Okay, great. There's two really big points I want to pick up on, right? Which I think a lot of brothers and sisters struggle with today. So you're saying go out there and do it, and then you're saying when you fail, then get up and just iterate and learn and go again, right? So let's take the first point. How do I kind of get out of my head, stop kind of thinking that I've got a really good idea? I spoke to this sister recently, right? Check this out. Really, really good sister. Got an amazing idea, which I really loved. And I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, yeah, right now I'm looking for seed funding and I'm doing this. I'm like, how long have you been looking for funding? Oh, a while. Her product is kind of related to a season, and that season is coming soon. And I'm like, how many products have you made? None. How many have you sold? None. And she's done nothing for months. And I was like, look, you need to stop thinking and start doing. Just even if you have to do a mock-up or you have to order some sample, do something, right? So what's your advice for people who, it's hard to kind of make that final product. Even when you're Amazon, you're choosing a product, you're like, oh, do I go with this one? How do we take action and how do we get moving?
So I came from a more of a perfectionist route. That's what kind of stopped me from moving forward when I realized that, because I just wanted the thing to be absolutely perfect. And that sort of delayed a lot of the stuff that I'd done in my life. So I quickly came to the realization that, it's never going to be perfect. And the only way to really know how good it is to put it out there. And so sometimes you've got to, I guess, sort of bite the bullet and just do it, and just accept the fact that it may not be my best effort, but something out there is better than something that's never going to be, materialized. So it's just about overcoming that fear, as you say. It's really about thinking about, what am I holding back from the world that could currently be out there right now, even if it's not in the perfect form that I want it to be. Can I do a smaller version of it? Can I do a minimum viable product, for example? Can I show it to a small subset of people? Can I just at least share the idea? Speak to other people about it, see what they think. And if I start to gauge that there's some interest, then that might give me some encouragement to continue. But the more that you let out and give out, the faster your feedback will be, and then it'll be easier for you to actually bring the final product into market, inshallah.
Okay, excellent. So, right, let's say that I then go out there, someone goes out there, I actually take the leap, I create something, I push something out there, and it fails miserably, right? I'm someone, let's imagine I've never really dealt with failure. I can't handle it. How do I get myself up? How do I try again and keep trying and keep going? What's the formula for that?
The fact is not to view the failure as some kind of stop point, but actually anticipate it in the journey. So, for example, I was recently at an event and I told my son, because I wanted him to start sort of getting into a bit of selling. So I said to him, I gave him some small products. Those Qibla arrows, I think, or something similar that you talked about. And I said to him, go out and sell these. And I guarantee you, well, I didn't say guarantee, but I'll tell you now that probably 9 out of the 10 people that you go to are going to say no. You're just waiting for that one. Okay. Because initially he was like, no, I'm not going to go there, Dad. I'm too scared. And what if they say no? And I said, look, 9 are going to say no. And then one of them is going to say yes. And you're just looking for that one. And that's the reality in life. Like, a lot of your ideas will fail because, we're not born knowing, what's going to work and what's not. So it's about embracing that and saying that, look, failure is part of the journey. So I've just figured out one way that doesn't work, but, I've still got to find out the ways that do. So it's about not seeing it as the end point, as I say, and just embracing it as part of the journey.
Yeah, I love that. Wonderful story, man. Like, it's so true that you've got to get comfortable with rejection. You've got to get comfortable with people saying no and it not doing well. It's like when you listen to all these stories of these authors, right? Like, I don't know, J.K. Rowling, who's probably the most successful author of all time, having so many rejections of her book and everyone else. But eventually, when they made it was amazing,
Absolutely.
So, alhamdulillah, that's great. MashaAllah. So, tell me a little bit more about like the middle phase. So I understand now why you started Learning Roots. I understand how it kind of came about. Tell me, like, what did you first start seeing real success with that you realized that, I think I do have something here that could be really big?
So after the first 3 products that did fail, pretty much, in terms of like the initial feedback before that, didn't hit the mark as I thought they would. So I kind of classified it. I thought, we were aiming at madrasas with these products maybe. Maybe we didn't get the market segment right, that kind of thing. So I decided to aim more at the home because I felt at that time that's an area that was really underserved. And so our next line of products were much more illustrated, much more engaging for children at home for use as opposed to madrasa use. And it was an instant hit. So I think we actually grew 10x in that first after the first iteration of products, and that really gave me a lot of encouragement. Like, okay, this is clearly working. Alhamdulillah, just in the second iteration, I found it, which was fantastic. But even in that second iteration, we went from releasing 3 products, I think it was, to 11. So we actually increased the number of products as well a lot. And that was part of the point that, I don't know what's going to work necessarily. I can have a hunch, I'm learning, but I don't really know. So the more ideas I put out there, the better. And so we grew a lot in that year, not just in the number of products we released, but also the response to it as well, which was really good. So we got 2 things right. A lot of the product ideas were better, and also the market segment that we pivoted to away from madrasas, for example, to home, and that worked really well. And that's why a lot of the products you see today from Learning Roots are designed actually for the home.
Okay, amazing. So tell me a little bit about, because, one of the reasons why I love the brand is not only the reason why you created it. I think that's huge in itself, to be able to do something with parents and children and things like that. But I think also it's really the design, it's the quality, it's the colors, it's the vibrancy, it's the brand as well. The branding has been done really, really well. It's completely in line with what I would like to see as a parent and stuff. Tell me a little bit about how do you design your products now that you've learned everything you learned? How do you design amazing products? How do you get it right? And how do you bring that kind of vibrancy to it?
So the vibrancy is like an element that I was thinking about it recently, actually, in fact, just today, that where did it actually come from? Where was this kind of, tendency from? And that, I like to call it creative excellence. And I felt that it was actually part of something that I was, sort of always inculcating in my life throughout everything I did. It was always something whatever I wanted to do, I wanted to do it well. I kind of mentioned that early on in my childhood. Yeah. And so I brought that to Learning Roots as well. So whatever we do, I don't like to do something mediocre. I really don't like to do something that's already out there just for the sake of making another one. It's always about what can we contribute, what can we bring to the table, how can we take things forward. And part of that is the physical outlook of the products, the quality, the illustrations, the concepts, and all of that package that you see externally, but also internally as well, like in terms of the concept of the product, where it's taking the child, what's now made possible with this experience, how can we present this particular topic in Islam to a child in a completely new way that really endears them to the deen. So how it comes about is partly that's the innate kind of nature that that's always there within the business, the brand identity, if you want to call it that. And some of it comes from just learning over time. A lot of the ideas that we've got from our products have come from customers telling us that this is what we'd like. Some of them are from cross industry, so we'd go to like large book fairs in Frankfurt and Bologna and the trade fairs that we have in the publishing industry.
Yeah.
And you see lots of good ideas in the mainstream, and you think there's something that can trend here also in the Muslim market. So it's taking in from a variety of different sources, and if you have good input, then inshallah you have good output as well.
Okay, so just to highlight some of the things you said. So firstly, like obviously the brand itself, you did a very good job on, and so everything you do kind of follows the brand guidelines and follow the vibrancy and the message and the spirit of the brand. Like you said, I think high standards is something that kind of underpins everything, and that's probably the reason why it's coming out so good. And then you said actually taking ideas from the people that you're serving, the customers, as well as looking at what other industries close by are doing and how it's kind of working. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. That's really, really amazing. Now, one of the things I want you to understand is leadership, as in building leaders within the children. So, as a child, most people, they go through different phases. Sometimes the lack of confidence, all these kind of issues, depending upon your parents. For me now, one of the big things I want to do is build my children up to be confident Muslims, and I want them to be leaders and all of this kind of stuff. What kind of things are you doing, or are you planning to do, in terms of building that kind of leadership ethos and that mentality, either within the parents or within the children that you're producing products for?
So I think it's really about, when it comes to children in particular, I think it's really about having a solid base of inspirational leadership stories. Mm-hmm. I think that's how children learn initially. It's about endearing them to real life examples of great leaders, and we have an absolute we have them plentiful in our tradition, alhamdulilah. And it's really about highlighting those elements, because we're talking about very aspirational people, very high achieving people, who were, the greatest leaders. Obviously, we're talking about the prophets here, and the head of them, the prophets. And so we have that inherently within everything we do, and also we have we put a lot of emphasis, for example, on the Sahaba and some of our products as well, because each of them in their own right were legends. Yeah. So initially, I think for a child, I think it's about building a very good base of stories that they're familiar with, because these are classics, that they should almost memorize and know about these great legends. And then as they grow, then you have that well to draw from, and those ideas to draw from. Some of the greatest leaders, for example, we had right now a little circle with our children. We talked about the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam, and the story of the ants, and how he went in the letter from Bilqis and so on. Yeah. And really, if you go through the passages of the Quran and you look at the leadership quality of Sulaiman alayhi salam in those passages, there's so much to learn. You could see he's a very confident king. He's a very alert king. He doesn't allow any of his subjects to sort of scurry off somewhere without permission. He's very authoritative. At the same time, he's extremely humble to Allah Azza wa Jal. So there's so much we can learn, I think, from the stories, from the Quran, and from the Seerah. And what we're trying to do at Learning Roots is, over time, try and build that bank of stories that we can give to our children, and then draw the lessons from over time.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, throughout human history, stories have been the vehicle for it. So it's great that you're thinking like that. And I think you're right. With the Sahaba cards, for example, I haven't bought them yet. I told Isa, if he shows exemplary behavior this week, then we're going to buy them on Friday, inshallah. But I think it's a wonderful idea. Rather than having, top trumps or dinosaur cards and stuff, to have Sahaba cards is absolutely amazing, mashallah. So tell me, who's a leader that inspires you, and why?
So I can't answer that question without saying, obviously, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Everyone says that, by the way. Everyone's like, the Prophet, I have to say it, of course, yeah.
And rightly so. And I'm not just saying that. In fact, to the extent where I remember, I thought, if I'm really truthful to that statement, then I would actually go and learn about the Prophet, really, and really study his leadership, really study his words and his actions, and how he dealt with certain situations. And it's mind-boggling when you look for something. In the Seerah, when you look for that particular quality, you realize, you think it was just all about leadership, and we missed the whole point. So it's that kind of thing. So There's just so many examples that are so inspiring from the life of the Prophet. I don't say that lightly. I'm not saying it's just a sort of answer and fill in the question. I do genuinely mean that. I think it's just a blessing that we have his examples preserved so well for us to learn from still today.
Is there someone in the modern world that inspires you for leadership?
I thought about it, and I'm thinking, yeah, there are people that inspire me in different places and different things. You know, I wouldn't say there's sort of one individual that I'd say, okay, that's great, but I like to see, you know, for example, you can learn something from you know, business from certain people. You can learn something about humility from others. You can learn something about, you know, influence from others. But overall, I wouldn't say there's like one individual that I'd say, okay, in the modern era that I'd say, okay, that's, you know, he's the go-to guy or person.
What is leadership for you? When you think of leadership, what does it mean to you?
Leadership for me is essentially about influence. Yeah, influencing yourself first of all, the people around you, to a noble and virtuous end, and that's the key point here. Because you can have good leadership, you can have bad leadership. You can have people who are good, effective leaders in the sense they can influence people, but it may not necessarily be to a good end. So I think it's really about that issue of influence, but combined really with a sense of righteous duty. And that's really how I see it. So it's, you know, all of us are leaders in all of in our lives. You know, as the hadith of the Prophet mentions that kullukum ra'in, yeah, that you are all leaders. And all of you are responsible for your flock, essentially. So we have that innate duty. The question is, do we realize and live up to it or not? But essentially, for me, it's about having that influence and then leading people to what is better.
Amazing. I love that. Having influence and leading people to what's better. I really like that. Jazakallah khair. So tell me something. Like, what was your first experience of real leadership? Like, do you remember, like, when leadership started for you? Like, where was it? How was it? What happened? The first time you ever kind of, you know, touched upon some sort of leadership?
Yeah, to be honest, I think generally I didn't wake up to the idea until very late. And there was an incident one time where I returned back from a business trip and I had someone who was working with me. Basically, you know, things didn't go according to plan. Sort of, I asked for something that didn't get it back the way I expected, and so on. And then I realized, you know what? I spent a lot of money on this trip, did a lot, and I didn't quite get the response I expected back from my team. So I thought, you know what, there's something about this whole experience that I need to learn from. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically I really felt the fact that I'm responsible for this. You know, I need to take responsibility. At the end of the day, I can't pass the buck to anybody else for the failure of anything that happens in this business. I need to take that on my own shoulders. And I remember sort of almost changing my identity at that point. I remember I became this very sort of, you know, authoritative person almost, you know, overnight. It was like, what's going on? You know, are you going to take responsibility for this business or not? Are you really true to its aims? Do you really want it to succeed or not? And it was a very kind of, I was questioning myself in that form, and I remember it very vividly, and I really felt, okay, that's the first time where I felt it was a real wake-up call to say, you know, you've really got to want this. Are you in it just for the ride, or are you in it to really take this somewhere? And it was a very poignant question asked at the time, and that was the first wake-up call I remember.
So very interesting. I've got a question for you about that then. You know, it's very natural for us when we have a failure and things go wrong to look for someone to blame, right? So, you know, you mentioned it didn't go so well. It would be very easy for you to blame that team member. Like, what was it that made you kind of reflect and, like, kind of call to yourself rather than saying, well, that guy, he's a loser, he just messed up?
So it's, again, about really thinking about, look, he can, if they do mess up, if the team does mess up, at the end of the day, you know, I'm going to end up with the pieces. So I've got to take responsibility for it. I remember this, something my driving instructor told me many years ago. He goes, if you have an accident, or you know, if you're involved in an accident, it doesn't matter whose fault it is at the end of the day. Both of your cars are going to be, you know, in a bad state, or you might be in a bad state. So the issue is avoid the accident in the first place. Take responsibility for it. Do what you can to avoid it, even if you think the other person is more prone to making it happen. So, and that's really what it was about. It doesn't matter about where the responsibility, it doesn't matter about the specifics of the mistake. It's really about me taking the steps to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and that's really firmly in my hands and my influence.
So where does this sense of responsibility come from? Because surely it didn't come at the time when the employee kind of messed up, right? It's something deeper from before. So where does it come from?
Yeah, so if you go like really deep, which is what I have to do sometimes, as you veer off the path, things happen, day-to-day business, that kind of thing, or you get distracted over time, life kicks in. So you have to have a way to extract yourself out of that situation and then realign yourself. Mm-hmm. So for me, I have my why, and my why is what I turn back to each and every time to try and make sure that I go back to where I should be, to realign. My why is very personal, and I have, like, as I say, if your why doesn't make you cry, then it's not a why. Yeah, it should really go to that emotional, deep level, and it should transcend this world. Ideally, as a Muslim, it shouldn't be related to just this world. It should be something that really relates to your position in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla in the Akhirah, and so that's what I go back to, to try and make sure that we realign.
So I'm not going to ask you your why because you just said it's very personal, right? But tell me, how did you discover your why?
To be honest, I discovered it through the stories. When I was reading through these stories, same stories that inshallah we hope to present to children through learning routes, it was about realizing, one common trend with these people is that they had some kind of fixation on a very, very high and noble goal that made them persevere through all of the challenges that they faced and kept them straight the whole life. And that must be extremely powerful. And it's essentially about, that unwielding iman, that unwielding desire to please Allah, that duty, as we say, that responsibility. They really felt that it's their own personal responsibility upon their shoulders to see their goals through in their particular field. So we're talking about the greats of the early greats of the Ummah, and we could really sense that, and that's where it came from. Like, we need to have that kind of sense of responsibility and why in our lives.
So you knew that you had to have a why, and you've got your why now, but what was the process between knowing I need one and actually having one? Like, what were the kind of steps, or how did you actually find it?
It doesn't come quickly. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of self-discovery. It's got to be very personal to you. So you can't take somebody else's why and just make it your own unless you've actually personally connected to it. So to be honest, I really like to retreat a lot. I like to go on retreats. I love the mountains. I love nature. So along the path of doing that for many years, it does sort of slowly grow on you that this is something that I really can attach myself to, and I think that it really resonates with me, and I feel that I can. It's really close to me. So it's not an easy process. It doesn't come quick. It's not something you can just read from a book and memorize and that's it. It's really something you've got to personally connect with, and it takes a lot of self-reflection to get there. And then over time, you'll see whether it stands the test of time or not. So if you come up with a why, and then when you're in trouble, you go back to the why and you say, okay, do I connect with that now? And if you don't, then maybe it's not your why. It's something you've got to really, really hone, and it's not something that comes easily, for sure.
Okay, amazing. So tell me about, all these kind of entrepreneurs I've spoken to, they've got these horror stories of business and things that were really bad and difficult times they went through. What were what was a really difficult time for you throughout building learning routes and stuff? Were there any times where you just felt really, really, it was really tough and difficult? And
yeah, countless times, even till now. This is still tough. It's not easy, but I do remember the very early days when I was at a sales event and we sold one product, right, just one.
What's wrong with that, by the way? Just so everyone knows, what's wrong with that? Selling one product.
Well, okay, let me explain. So you have all this, you have the emotion, like you're very excited, you're going out. It's you expect, your expectations are high. You spent a lot of money going there, making the effort, taking the time. And then when one person buys it, it's not the fact that you just sold one. It's actually the fact that you feel like you start to doubt yourself. Is it really, am I doing something that people really care about? Am I wasting my time? Am I better off going back into a job? Is it really worth it? And then when I came home, my mum said to me, how long are you going to carry this on for? How long is this going to continue for? How do you expect to support a wife and a child when you've got, when you haven't even sold you just sold a single product today?
That's like a double whammy, isn't it? You got all the pain, and then you got the reality of life at home as well.
Yeah, but that is the reality, because life is not divorced from our businesses, and our business isn't divorced from life. You're a human being. You go through emotions. You have parents. You have children. You have spouses. You've got other things to look after, and so it's a whole package. So that emotional side, obviously I felt down anyway, and that was really like it hit me a lot. It's like, and you start to think, yeah, it's true. What am I going to do? How am I going to support this? So at that point, alhamdulillah, Allah Azza wa Jalla blessed us with a sale that came. I remember it was my father. He had his phone, and there was like a ka-ching sound that indicated that we'd had a sale on the website. And at that point, he said to me, "Look, take that as a sign that you're going to continue." And
was that on the same day, or was
that was at the same point, just as my mom said.
Wow, subhanallah. Yeah. Okay, amazing.
So just after she said that, that's what happened. And then my dad said, "Take that as a sign that you're going to continue." And so I did.
Amazing. Literally ka-ching from probably Shopify or something. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't Shopify in those days. But it was, we got an email notification. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. May Allah reward that person that made that sale that day. Alhamdulillah. Okay, great. So, but, when you face things like that, maybe some of the brothers and sisters are not so lucky to have family around and people that support them, or not a wife or someone, right? And you're going through this journey on your own, and you face a day like that where you didn't say anything, you're doubting yourself big time, you're thinking about packing it all in. Like, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's going through like something like that?
Essentially, it goes back to your niyyah. Yeah, if you started off with a good, sincere intention, and you were sincere to Allah Azza wa Jalla about what you were doing and why you're doing it, then don't let go of that. Because, inshallah, Allah Azza wa Jalla will, fulfill His promise, and it will reward you for the sincerity that you have in your intention. So it's really about thinking about the wider picture of things. Who are you really doing it for? Are you doing it for yourself? Doing it for your family? And that's fine. But ultimately, who are you doing it for? So if you're doing it for Allah's sake, and you're doing it seeking His pleasure, then inshallah the path will be good for you.
But how do I do it for Allah and for Allah's pleasure? Because I might just be trying to launch a business. Like, this is not a charity, this is not an NGO or anything. Like, I'm actually just genuinely trying to do business to earn halal income and stuff. How do I make it for Allah?
Great question. So when I first started, I've still got this document till today. One of the first things I did was I made a document of intentions. Mm-hmm. So I wrote down all the different intentions that I could have when I have this business. And in that list is things like, obviously for me, because the business is inherently related to the deen of Islam, you have that element. But outside of those things, to seek halal rizq, as you mentioned, to facilitate a lifestyle that was more pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jal. For example, I didn't feel the 9 to 5 was really conducive to the kind of life I wanted to live. And ultimately, if you're going to find something that really fits for you, as a human being, and it's going to fit your lifestyle a lot better, and if your lifestyle is something that has your religion and has Allah Azza wa Jal as a concern within it, then that business is going to facilitate that thing to happen. And that's what it's really about. So it's thinking much broadly about not the specific business per se, but how I'm going to do business. The principles I'm going to live by, and what I'm going to do with this wealth, or the direction I'm taking people in, and where I want to take this ultimately in the future. So it's thinking much more broadly about the intention, and not just limiting it to something that has to be, for example, related to something specific with the deen.
So let's say I'm selling, rubber gloves. Okay, so tell me, how do I now connect that to Allah? Okay, so
first of all, you'd have to be really passionate to start rubber gloves. if you don't like rubber gloves, I wouldn't advise.
It had a good PSL on Amazon, right? So I was like, I gotta do it.
Yeah.
Let's imagine.
And I think that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Passion and proficiency are two very important things in business. So you have to be really passionate about it. And so, you'd seek, and if you genuinely are passionate about that, obviously it wouldn't be rubber gloves per se. I'd assume it'd be something to do with, cleaning or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's something that Allah Azza wa Jal has given you and planted in your heart. It's something that, that you tend to go to. And and you're fulfilling that in a nice halal way, and you're doing it to seek Allah's rizq in that way, then raise your hands to Allah Azza wa Jalla and say, oh Allah, I'm starting this path with this intention in something that you've blessed me with, and I ask you, Allah, to allow me to start a business in this, to seek your pleasure, to seek halal rizq, to do so in a way that pleases you, which is a key issue. To do business with people and treat people and be with people in a way that's ultimately pleasing to you, Allah, and conduct yourself in that way. But you're doing so in a way that's really true to yourself. Because if you are passionate about that thing and you found a nice, good, halal avenue to bring a contribution to the world, then alhamdulillah, it's a great position to be in.
Amazing. So it doesn't matter what you sell, it's more about why you do it, and it's more about how you sell and stuff, as long as it's halal, obviously. Okay, amazing. Alhamdulillah. Great. So tell me something, when it comes to your industry, obviously when you started, I'm imagining that there weren't so many people out there. There weren't so many things out there for parents and things like that. But now, as time goes on, you've got different companies starting, different people coming into the field, people looking at you. It's like a very Asian thing as well. He's making money. Okay, let me go and do that thing, right? So although you kind of have a story and you have your own journey and you have why you're doing it, there's people popping up everywhere. It's so easy to kind of start a business nowadays. Like, how do you keep yourself unique? How do you keep yourself differentiated from everyone? How do you innovate? How do you kind of keep that X factor going, just like, when you had the whole market to yourself in the early days?
So the key issue is staying true to the core, true to what the initial, the founder mentality was at the beginning, which is what was the core issue, what we were trying to do. We were trying to help Muslim parents raise great Muslim children. Mm-hmm. So the moment we start looking left and right, look at what others are doing or what else is happening, and we lose that connection we had to what made Learning Roots great in the beginning, is the point of decline then. So it's about staying true to that initial core, even if the way in which it manifests itself today will be different to how it manifests itself in the beginning. But it's about maintaining that Learning Roots touch throughout everything that we do and not getting sidetracked or distracted. And personally, I like it. I like the fact that we have competition. In fact, I've been wanting it for a long time because I think that first of all, there's just a need in this market. It's so empty that, we can't fill it ourselves. We need others to come in and help this movement because, at the end of the day, it's our children who are going to benefit, and that's what we want. So I'm happy with that. And plus, of course, competition is always healthy. So you're going to have, bits you get inspired by, like, okay, I didn't see that. That was really good. Okay, mashallah, great. And how can we make it even better? If someone discovered something, then let's say, okay, how can we make that experience even better? Not to copy it. I'm not a fan of that kind of thing. But I'm definitely there to say, okay, if we didn't stumble upon something first, it doesn't mean we can't actually improve the offering that's currently there.
Okay, amazing. So, what kind of advice would you give to people who are like leaders, people who are developing businesses or trying to grow their business or grow their product? Because I see you as someone who has a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things in business. Like, we're part of a lot of the similar mastermind groups. We've been through a lot of the same kind of content and things like that. So what's the kind of big kind of ideas, the big gems that you kind of got for these things that you would give as advice to other people?
Two things I'd say. First is having absolute clarity about what you want to do. Because if you're not clear, then it will show. It will really show. You'll start to get distracted. You'll try a new business model. You try a new idea, and you'll just get distracted. So being absolutely clear, envision it, see it live. Like, just close your eyes and see if you can actually imagine and see what your vision actually looks like. After your contribution has now been given to the world, what does it look like?
Yeah.
Well, how do you feel? How do people feel? What does that actual product look like? What is it doing for people? How is it changing their lives? What new world state have you created by giving this gift to the world? That's the first thing. Clarity is extremely important. And it's not just in the product, it's in anything. Like, if you don't start your day knowing what you want to do, chances are, you're not going to end up doing what you wanted because you didn't know what it was in the first place.
Yeah.
So clarity is just an important thing. And one thing that I've really heard about a lot, but really experienced recently when we did our Ramadan activity book campaign, was necessity. Like there were so many points in that where I thought this book's not going to meet the deadline. We've been working on it for months. It's just not going to make it. And there came a point where I said, no, this is going to happen no matter what. And I'm going to just do whatever it takes to make sure it happens. And raising that bar of necessity is extremely, extremely important to make sure things come out, happen, and extending it, not just from a product, but to your business and to your life. Now, I'm not going to settle for second best here. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen now. There's a real deep conviction that you hold in your heart, and it manifests itself in everything that you do. And I really think that from necessity, you'll have clarity. From necessity, you'll get energy. From necessity, you'll get productivity. And you'll get all the elements that you need to make sure that thing happens. But necessity is extremely important. You've got to literally say, it's this or nothing. I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah, that's wonderful, mashallah, because clarity, like you said, once you're clear on where you're going, then it's just a case of getting it done, and that necessity will breed that action and stuff. So that's amazing. What about growth hacks, bro? Like thinking about, because, again, I see you as someone who's very knowledgeable in marketing and things like that. You've done a lot of work. Any growth hacks, any ideas for growing organizations, growing businesses?
I would say the main thing I'd say is always investing in yourself. It doesn't seem like it's not sort of a small tactic, but I really do believe in that. I think that the biggest growth hack you can have is to grow yourself, right? And that means investing in yourself, investing in the courses you go to, the people you meet, the networking you do, the books you read, because you are, an extension of your business. And the more you grow, you're just raising the lid on your business.
So what kind of things do you do to grow yourself?
So I'd make sure I'm on top of my industry, for example, making sure attending the industry fairs, seminars, that kind of thing. That's from the industry level. I also, like you mentioned, in marketing, make sure I'm on top of all the courses, the latest trends that are happening in digital marketing especially right now.
And you pay for this stuff, yeah?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay.
And then also seeking out good advice, good counsel from people who have been there, done that, even if it's not in your field, but people who can advise you, that's really important as well. And obviously reading books. So, Audible's a great friend.
Yeah, definitely. I love Audible. So tell me, what are some of the books that you recommend, some of the resources that you recommend? It could be even software that you recommend for business, for leadership, for growth. What are some of the big, like if I said to you, give me 3 books or 3 resources, like what are the kind of things you'd be saying to me?
Okay, so it really depends on what stage you're talking about, because there's software for different stages and books for different levels and that kind of thing. But 3 books that really stood out for me over time was The Lean Startup by Eric Rice.
Good, yeah.
I like that book a lot. It really teaches you a lot about just getting started and getting over that perfectionist issue that we talked about earlier. I love Traction. I think Traction is an amazing book for sort of putting everything into place.
Yeah.
And I really like reading on strategy. So Play to Win is a big. I
haven't read Play to Win. What's it about?
Playing to Win essentially is from the former directors of Procter & Gamble, and it was all about it's essentially about a framework of strategy, but a really simple framework that they used to launch brands, and I find it really fascinating.
Amazing. Yeah, Procter & Gamble. If you're going to learn from anyone about branding and launching brands, definitely Procter & Gamble. Okay, amazing. So what's one question that I should have asked you that I haven't asked that will really benefit people?
I don't know, Mohammad. You ask me.
That's your job. Don't put your job onto me, boy.
Yeah.
Now, what's one thing that you'd like to share as your kind of final parting advice for people who are aspiring to be leaders, people who are aspiring to grow their organizations, grow themselves? What's kind of the advice you'd like to give to them?
Never stop learning. Never grow old of learning. Never think that the journey's over, because it's not. This world is evolving. We are evolving as human beings, and there's always something to learn. But the moment you think you've clocked it, that you know it, that you've mastered it, that's probably the point of decline. So that's something I wish I'd done from the beginning. Like always, just continually kept on reading something, because you never know, something can inspire you. Something you hear something, you see something, you read something, and it might just push you on to the next level. It's a small nugget of information that you needed that would take you to the level that you want to go to. And unless you continue the learning journey, you may never stumble upon it. So never grow stale by staying still. You always have to keep moving, and that's the growth journey. What we've always got to go through.
Amazing. Jazakallah khair. Zaheer, it's been an absolute pleasure. You know, time's flown, bro. It's really like flown. I've really enjoyed it. Jazakallah khair for your time, for all your wonderful advice. I know anyone watching it is gonna love it. They're gonna get lots of gems. I'm gonna cut it up because there's lots of great stuff to do. So Jazakallah khair, bro. Thank you so much for joining me. Brothers and sisters, this is the Muslim CEO Show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned as much as I did. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe. Please check out the free training also at muslimceo.com. Once again, Jazakallah khair to my dear brother Zaheer. Inshallah, we'll catch up soon. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.